Gamecocks and Gators at Williams-Brice Stadium. And I've been mentioning this all week long. What's been so funny, guys, is you have a pair of fan bases that are jaded for their own reasons, and a pair of fan bases that it seems each are expecting the worst to happen on Saturday. And the ironic part, the funny part is, like, somebody's got to win this football game. Somebody's going to win, whether it's South Carolina or Florida. On the Gators side of things, you look at the way they've played on the road under Billy Napier, and it's been abysmal, guys, start to finish in each of those games. The only game they've had in which it was a successful performance on the road was at Texas A&M last year. And most Gator folks write that off as, well, playing a true freshman quarterback in his first start, what have you. Outside of that, they've been terrible. I mean, you go back to this year, a couple of weeks ago at Kentucky, right? Start to finish, they got thoroughly beat down, especially out the gate in that game. It was over before the game even started. You go back to the season opener against Utah. Florida looked discombobulated, had two guys with the same number jersey on the field, had a point on special teams. They had 8 guys on the field. Like, in all facets of the game, they've looked discombobulated on the road. You then look at South Carolina. The Gamecocks have a lot going for them coming out of the bye week, 15-2 off of the bye, 2-0 under Shane Beamer, 15-2 since 2009, I should say, off of the bye. 2-0 under Shane Beamer, with, of course, one of those wins, 2021, coming against Dan Mullen's Florida Gators. But a South Carolina fan base that, from my perspective, I feel like it's a bit on edge, right? The sour taste of the game against Tennessee remains. And I think many wearing garnet and black are just wondering, who is this football team? Like, who is this football team really? Because South Carolina sits 2-3 overall, 3 losses. The combined record of those 3 teams is 15-1. All 3 losses coming to ranked opponents at the hands of North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. But outside of Georgia, it's how those losses have happened, right? And I think the Tennessee game was a really, I don't want to call it a breaking point. That might be a little bit harsh, but it was a brutal dose of reality. In the fact that many people who had 9-3 or 10-2 in their preseason predictions realized very quickly that is highly unlikely at this point. So now you look at this game against Florida. And as I've mentioned previously, a game that I labeled over the summer as the most important game of the 2023 season, and I stand by that. This game is the difference between South Carolina going, dare I say, 5-7 or 7-5 this season, and to have any chance to reach your goals of, say, a 7 or maybe even 8-win season. Maybe you do something crazy and you rattle off a bunch of victories down the stretch and go on a winning streak. But to even have a chance to do that, this is a game that you have to have. Whether you want to call it a must-win, you want to call it a can't-lose, you want to just say it's a pivotal SEC East showdown. No matter what phrase or what adjective or what label you want to put on it, it's a huge game, and it's a huge game for both sides. Because as I mentioned, on the South Carolina side, Gamecock fans are looking around. Who is this team really? Is there hope and is there promise that Carolina can turn things around and get to 7 or 8 wins? Or is this going to be a year 3 dip for Shane Beamer? And on the Florida side, I mean, I think Gator fans, guys, a lot of them still look at South Carolina as a team we should beat more often than not. And Florida fans look at this game and say, okay, if you're going to play well on the road, this is the time to do so. And if you can't get it done on the road, maybe it'll never happen. I mean, Billy Napier, our coach, guys, coming into year 2, you could have argued he was on the hot seat, some Gator fans out there. Because at Florida, You don't get a long leash. It's win now, deliver. We want results. It's a program that's used to winning championships, not having an over-under of 5.5 win total in Vegas. So you look at this game on Saturday afternoon. Starting defensively for South Carolina, the matchup of this football game in my mind is the Gamecocks defensively, that rushing defense, that front seven against Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. If Trevor Etienne can go, they've also got Trayon Webb. They've got a really nice stable of running backs, guys. And what they do offensively, running the football, the short passing game with Graham Mertz. South Carolina has to play aggressively in this one. If you sit back and let Graham Mertz dink and dunk you to death and let Florida pop off 4 to 5 yards per carry, guys, Florida's offensive line, by the way, as makeshift as it's been, as many problems as it's had. And by the way, Florida, we now know, without their starting center in this football game, that is a big loss for them. We'll see how big of a loss on Saturday. But Florida's offensive line has been one of the best in the SEC at getting a push for the running game, meaning Florida's averaging, I think it's a little bit over 3 yards per carry. I don't have the exact stat up in front of me, but Florida's averaging a little bit over 3 yards per carry in the sense that that's their offensive line push, right? Their offensive line push is over 3 yards. That's how much the offensive line's accounting for in the rushing attack, which is very good. That cannot be the case on Saturday. If Carolina's getting blown off the ball and Florida's able to run the football, it could look a lot like last year, where the Gators, they didn't do anything all that special. They just ran it down South Carolina's throat. And we all have nightmares of watching Carolina football, just have no answer for the rushing attack. You've got to sell out on the run, play up, play tight, play aggressive, make Graham Mertz beat you over the top. Offensively, guys, I think it's somewhat simple for South Carolina. Grind out yards with Mario Anderson, get just enough to find some semblance of balance, and protect Spencer Rattler. And if you do that, I believe in Spencer Rattler in the sense that he's been so good this year when he's had any lick of time, when he's had any lick of support. If he gets that against the Gators defense, by the way, that has not been great rushing the quarterback. Ironically enough, they're tied with South Carolina for dead last in the SEC in sacks with a grand total of 9. South Carolina should be able to protect Spencer Rattler. I will say this, though. This is one of the better defenses, I think, in the SEC. This is a good defense at all 3 levels. It's a good defense. They've got some studs. Got a good defensive line. Cam Jackson in the middle, Princely on the edge. Fantastic set of linebackers in their secondary. A couple of guys haven't lived up to the hype, but they've got talent back there as well. But I do think the Gamecocks can hit a couple of deep shots in this one and expose that Florida defense just a little bit. I think home field advantage in this one, guys, is big. I think it's imperative South Carolina start fast, punch the Gators in the mouth early to make them have that feeling of, here we go again on the road under Billy Napier. I do think this is a back-and-forth ball game. You know, one of the scary things is that some of Florida's strengths go right up against your weaknesses. And if the Gamecocks cannot slow down the rushing attack, well, we're having a totally different conversation. We're having a completely different convo about this football game and probably the prospects of this season. South Carolina, it's incredible how good they've been with extra time to prepare. I'd probably have far less confidence if there was no bye week and South Carolina played Tennessee than Florida right after. But the fact of the matter is, they did get that extra time. I think this is a lower scoring than expected. I already told you guys I love the under 51. Lower scoring than expected ball game. I do think South Carolina will make the necessary adjustments defensively to play aggressively, put this game on Graham Mertz. This is not a high-flying Gators offense. I think they will sputter. I think it's a bounce-back performance for South Carolina defensively. And I think offensively, I do think you see Spencer Rattler return to form. I think Xavier Legette gets going once again. Look for South Carolina's tight ends to be much, much more involved. I think Mario Anderson provides just enough on the ground. I'm not saying he's going to hit 100 yards, but provides just enough on the ground to provide some semblance of balance for the Gamecocks' offensive attack. And I think at home, although it's not a night game, look for the Gamecocks to have a score in an unconventional manner, defensively or special teams. That being said, I do see this as a coin flip game. I think this is a really tight contest, but I think there's a better chance South Carolina wins by double digits than loses this football game. It's a fourth quarter ball game. South Carolina will do just enough behind yet another heroic effort by Spencer Rattler and a defense that is aggressive, that attacks, and forces this Florida offense into mistakes. And guys, you cannot trust Florida football on the road. They have been abysmal under Billy Napier. The Gamecocks are great off of bye weeks. They're great at home. I think you factor all that in. South Carolina will get a much-needed victory and get themselves back to 500 on the 2023 season. Lock me in. I've got South Carolina 24, Florida 20. And what I think should be a really fun game at Williams-Brice Stadium. I think home field advantage plays a key role yet again. And remember what I said, unconventional methods of winning. I think you see that either defensively or on special teams. I think the Gamecocks get a score. And I think it's one of those typical kind of sloppy slugfest type of Carolina-Florida games, but Carolina edging out the Gators 24-20.